Okay, so since the last video I did, I have almost everything in the car put back together. The exhaust is still not on it because I'm waiting for the HTG server to come back online so I can update the firmware on the GCU so that I can finish assigning inputs and outputs. But at this point I have the interior all back together. The console's back in, the seats are back in, the pedal assembly is back up there, the steering wheel is back on with the paddle shifters. They feel pretty nice. So I have a manual fan switch right here. This arms launch control or trans brake, if however you want to say that. So that actually is the trans brake. I have an Aeroforce gauge because I wanted to always know oil pressure, and you know there's no oil pressure gauge on this. And then this gauge right here is the transmission information gauge. Shows me what gear, what mode, and what temperature the transmission is in. I got that and everything at this point that I needed for this transmission from Seems Legit Garage. They've been very helpful in helping me figure out things that need to be done as far as how to make things work. And then under the hood here, this right here is a push button circuit breaker for all of that stuff that I have going on. And then I have the trans cooler right here and the transmission or the trans cooler fan switch, which is right there. It's actually a pretty beefy transmission cooler, and this is all 8AN line that's used to cool the transmission. And then okay, so what we have here is those are the trans cooler lines. They run under and around and all the way up front, obviously. And then this right here is the manual park release, because these transmissions are electronic and not manual. So I want to make sure that I can move the car without having the engine started. And then you move back here. So this is the factory transmission mount right here. I'm using it. I have 1, 2 over here, bolts that are in the factory mounts. And this is just one. Now here, I'm going to have to drill a hole, slot this out, probably weld a nut onto a piece of steel, slide it up in there so that I can bolt this in place the rest of the way. So then I'll have 4 transmission mounts. This is for the factory, or the factory vehicle speed sensor. I have not hooked that up yet. This is the new drive shaft. This is a giant slip yoke that's right in here. And I already had the one-piece drive shaft on this car, so I just needed to, mount it up. All right, over here is where all the wiring for the GCU. It's where they all converge essentially for now. And that's the wiring map I was using, and you can get that from Seems Legit Garage too, because this is their loom, their wiring harness loom I used. So all I did was label all the wires as far as what was going to go to where to get this in the car. So far things seem right. The situation is the GCU doesn't have the correct firmware for me to finish everything up. That's all I'm waiting on at this point. So hopefully here in the next few days I get to the point where I'm able to assign the gear selector to the correct voltage for that linear position sensor that I have on the shifter, to know if it goes into drive, reverse, neutral, that whole thing, park, reverse, neutral. and then manual mode. I'm going to set to where the 3-2-1 on the shifter is essentially putting it into manual mode rather than just drive. And so far I've been working on this. This is the 4L60 position shifter. So what I'm going to try and do, what I started doing, is I'm going to mount this on the side of the transmission roughly where it goes so that I can connect the factory shift rod to it. And this is literally only for my use because I want this to look as factory as I can. So if I plug this into back into the harness, and when I shift the shifter back and forth, my gauge cluster will tell me whether or not it is in whatever position it's in. So it's just without having to look down and see where the shifter is at or look at that other gauge, you know, as I'm looking straight forward, I can glimpse down to see where I'm at. So hopefully I can have that wrapped up here in a little while. That's the second design of that shifter position indicator. What I did do though is I actually went to a transmission shop. This was part of what this was, and that's on the back side. I welded a washer on the back side of that because this needs to stay completely parallel to that input, because when I tried to do it without it, just had a carriage bolt going through there to turn it, it was binding up on the shifter. So as soon as I can get this fully mounted and into the correct position, I'll be pretty much done. So once everything update wise happens for the HTG server, I'll be able to finish a lot of things. I have not put any fluid in this transmission yet because it's almost $200 in fluid, and I need to make sure that my solder job on the circuit board that I had to put in the mechatronics, I have to make sure the valve check comes out good. If that comes out good, then I can fill the transmission up, put the new filter I actually have for it up there, and then put the exhaust on, and then I'm done with the bottom end. Aside from the vehicle speed sensor, I still have to wire that in. So hopefully here in the next 2-3 weeks, I can be test driving the car and tuning in the GCU to make sure that it shifts as it should. So hopefully here I'll have another video in the next week or so.